Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne on Global Voice Radio. Join Roxanne Derhodge and her thought-provoking conversations, the catalyst to live your life to the fullest.
So hi everyone, it's Roxanne Derhodge. Thanks so much for tuning in again to Authentic Living with Roxanne. So today I have a very, very special guest. This is someone that's been a colleague for, goodness, I'm trying to remember how long, at least over 15 years, I would think.
Over 15 years.
15 years. Miss Caroline Codsi. Caroline brings an impressive resume. She did when I worked with her in a corporate consulting, but has done some amazing things since. And Caroline, I'm just going to read a bit about your bio, and I'm going to love to hear just from Caroline's words what things she's been up to. Obviously, she's a passionate, strategic leader. She's been successful in the corporate world for well over 25 years, being a VP and a senior VP in some major roles with huge organizations. She's founded the Womeningovernance, and I would like her to say it in French.
La Gouvernance au Feminin.
You see, I would not say that well. It sounds so much better when it comes from you. This is a place in Canada that an organization, nonprofit, has been developed to work with women in leadership to advance their careers on boards in Canada. And some of the major initiatives is having major events with inspiring women to have local and international speaking engagements. There's a robust mentoring program for women at the VP level to reach the C-suite and the board, and governance courses and a corporate parity certification. You've had your backgrounds in HR, and you were born in Beirut. You lived there till from age 7 to 22. And you've recently won multiple awards. One of the ones that stick out the most is that you're the top 100 most powerful women in Canada. Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
And most recently, not that you haven't, some of the big interviews, and the most recent one was with Hillary Clinton, which I know has been spreading like wildfire, and Justin Trudeau, Princess Sarah Zeid of Jordan, amongst lots of, there's a long list here.
The long list.
But I just want Caroline to be able to share with you. So Caroline, thanks so much for being here and spending the time with us today. So what I want to do is to have women like you that are inspiring the world, not just women, but also men, to really kind of use their authentic voice. And in looking at what you've been doing, amazingly so, you and I have been at the corporate level. We understand some of the corporate pressures, but you've kind of gone on and really created a space for women in the VP level. So right. Tell me a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about Caroline and what she's been up to in the last little while.
Well, so as you mentioned, we used to work together many years ago, and my career has been very flourishing. All the way to the senior vice president role that I held for 4 years at Canada's largest medical expertise firm, which I left at the beginning of last year, at the beginning of 2017, to actually focus on the non-for-profit that I had created 7 years earlier. And the reason why I had to make this difficult decision was that the non-for-profit had become so huge that it was just literally impossible to continue to manage it on the side, especially when I was in a major role in the corporate world. So it was a very difficult decision, but I can tell you I never looked back since. It's been an unbelievable year, and I know 2018 is going to be even more spectacular. So you mentioned our events. We always have amazing speakers at our events. We have men, we have women on stage. When we have panels, we never have only women. We always like to have the perspective of at least one man. Also because, we would criticize any panel that is only composed of men. I think it's, of paramount importance that men are involved in the discussion. They still have the power. They are the ones who will decide whether they open the door or not to a boardroom. So if we don't have them as allies, we're probably not going to get very far. And I can tell you that one of the reasons that Women in Governance has been so successful is because we have actually parity on our board. We have 9 board members, 5 women and 4 men. And on all our committees, we have men. So we take their perspective. We use them as sponsors. We use them as, ambassadors of the cause. And it goes a long way. So at our events, there's about, I would say, maybe 35% men, 40% men, which compared to, other events for the cause of advancement of women is pretty good. So our events is what started us, is what kind of put us on the map 7 years ago, because I did a lot of high-level interviews and people were interested. After that, we realized that wasn't enough, Women come, they listen, they're inspired. Do they apply these things tomorrow morning in their lives? Not necessarily. So we thought we should take it a step further and put in place a mentoring program where we're actually for 12 months matching a woman who's at the VP level. We take women who are already pretty senior. And for many people, it seems like they've already gone through the glass ceiling, but in my book, not yet.
Right.
We want them to become president. We want them to chair boards. We want them to sit on major boards, paying boards. We're not talking about non-for-profit. There are women all over non-for-profit boards because, men are less interested and women don't mind not being paid. This needs to stop. And for 12 months, they're supported in terms of, having the guts to actually accept a role that seems to be beyond them, taking a stretch assignment, getting out of their comfort zone, also coached around, do you have all that it takes in terms of your professional experience, your education, your network, etc. We've also added to that governance courses where we also want women to feel that, yes, they have all that it takes to sit on a board. We're really checking all the boxes to make sure women can't say, no, I'm not ready for this. Right. And our parity certification that you've mentioned, and we're going national with the parity certification in 2018. It's been launched last year, and we were focused on Quebec, national or multinational organizations, but for the Quebec employees only. Last year, we had 17 organizations certified, 3 of which were platinum. That's RBC, Royal Bank, Sun Life, and Intact Insurance. All 17 are major organizations, and we've decided this year to give them a chance to submit nationally, not just provincially. Right. And we think we'll have between 75 and 100 organizations who will come on board. So our goal is for every organization in Canada to want to be certified. We want every candidate, male or female, during an interview to ask HR, are you certified? Because that'll give them an idea of the culture and the importance that organization puts around the advancement of women and gender equality.
So tell me a bit more about that, the parity kind of, what's involved? You're talking about huge companies. I'm sure you have, the breadth of sizes, but when you're talking parity, how do you kind of decide what that metric looks like in an organization?
So it's a pretty extensive process. It would take typically to an HR executive or someone on their team about 3 to 4 hours to complete once they've got all the data under their hands, because we are not only asking questions around the board and the executive committee and how many women and just the quantitative aspect, but first of all, we're also asking for qualitative data, and I'll get more into that in a second. And second of all, we're going to all levels of the organization from entry-level roles. So from your receptionist, from your clerks, all the way to your CEO and to your board. And the questions are around, again, number of women, et cetera, but also around policies and procedures that have been implemented to allow women to advance their career. So our minimum is 400 employees. That was the case for minimum 400 in Quebec. Now it's going to be minimum 400 nationally. But we will have a certification for small and medium businesses as of 2019. Right now, we're focused on the larger ones simply because what we've built, and we were supported by McKinsey and Company in building that questionnaire, which is about close to 50 questions. What we built is really around the policies and the processes that are in place typically in a larger organization. So once we will implement it for smaller businesses, we're going to have to revamp that questionnaire. There are questions that will not be pertinent because in a small business, sometimes you hardly have a dedicated HR. So let alone a question like, do you have a dedicated person for diversity and inclusion?
Right, absolutely.
Sense, right? And we are obviously asking questions also around how do these organizations treat complaints for harassment? How do they resolve, mediate, etc.? We already had this last year, and it's interesting because we built it 2 years ago, launched it last year, and now it seems to be central. So we're adding on to that, with the Me Too movement, etc. It's become really important to make sure that in all industries it is addressed.
And is it not so timely, right? Obviously we've been women in, executive positions. We understand the sectors that we dealt with. We understand the environments that were predominantly female versus male. But at this particular point in time, the issues are being highlighted by places like Hollywood, where we're seeing, such a big mammoth system being, having to become transparent because of what's been blown open. So looking at from a small or a micro to a macro, that brush is just, huge and such work that needs to get done. Now tell me, okay, obviously, where did this passion come from? I know you've been in business a long time. Years ago when we were in corporate together, we were in different roles. Tell me where that burning passion to create what you've created came from.
Well, two things. First of all, as you mentioned, I was born in Lebanon. I grew up through the war. I've seen a lot of injustices, and even, the war started when I was 7. And even at that time, I was realizing that there were crazy things happening around me, and that adults were not necessarily rational or fair or equitable. And I started, I became very observant at that time. And the thing that struck me the most was, in Lebanon, everybody has, from, I'd say, mid-class and up, everybody has maids at home. And they're, for the most part, from Sri Lanka or from the Philippines. And like everybody else, we also had maids. And in my family, we always treated them like family. We were always very respectful. We were taught to respect these women. But I would see in most families, they were actually treated very poorly. Some were raped, some were beaten, some had their passports confiscated. I mean, for me, it was just unreal. And I always thought to myself, why do they treat them differently? So there was some racism, there was some sexism, misogyny. And overall, the laws in Lebanon are completely flawed. I mean, a Lebanese woman who marries a foreigner cannot give her nationality to her children, Lebanese nationality, whereas obviously a Lebanese man can. Lebanese men cheat on their women, on their wives all the time. If the wife cheats, she goes to jail. There's crazy things like that at a very young age, I realized made me crave for justice and equality. And when I came here in 1990, I realized, in my mind, Canada must have been the land of, equality and men, women. It was all the same. And I got involved in the community. I helped a lot around women's shelters because I realized, that there are a lot of difficulties there as well. And I was, very quickly, my own career in parallel was just moving. And I realized that women, even in the corporate world, who seem to have it all, were actually treated unfairly. There was a gender wage gap. There were difficulties in terms of, being able to have a voice at the table. And, the statistics are striking. I mean, there's only 5% of women CEOs in Canada. There's 15.9% of women on corporate boards, and 40% of boards in Canada don't even have one woman.
Wow.
So, you know, it's quite shocking. So I felt that I had a really strong desire to make a difference there, although I didn't know how to do it. And as my own career was progressing, Roxanne, I also realized that I was moving up the ladder with not very many women around me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're sitting on an executive committee and looking around you, and all are men, and they're mansplaining and they're interrupting, and they're just not used to having a woman around them. And you'd say something and they take your idea and repeat it, and everybody concurs, and you just said it 2 minutes before. So I think that also helped me develop my voice, because I, you know, wasn't going to take that. But then I realized that not all women had that type of personality that it requires to be able to do something like this. And I thought, well, maybe if I put in place some sort of a mentoring program, maybe if I give workshops and conferences and speak to these women, I can bring some sort of change. And so I did that. And it actually, I did not think that it was going to be that well, I knew it would be well received, but I didn't realize the huge need that there was, because all of a sudden people were like, it was buzzing. And then came those questions, you know, why you, you come from a country where, forget about equality. How come you come here and you're asking us to do more? And I said, well, no, because I know in my country, where for the first time last year, we had a ministry of status of women, which is led by a man. You know, I know that I will not be able to make any changes over there. I get that. Here, we're pretty close to where we should be. We're not there yet, but we need to work, and we need to work with men. We need to work with women. So men now understand that it's not only the ethical thing to do. They get it, that if they want to have a better financial performance for their organization, diversity is key. I mean, there's a ton of research on that. So, and very robust research. So we don't need to do that anymore, to explain why, you know, please, Mr. CEO, please, Mr. Chair of the board, understand that it's in everybody's interest, including, you know, not only your organization, but the society, the economy as a whole. So based on that, women also need to step up, because that's the other thing. You know, recently the Canadian, the BDC, the Banque de Développement, the Canadian
okay, I can help you
Bank, I guess, the BDC.
HRDC?
Sorry?
Human Resources Development Canada?
No, the bank, the Business Development Bank of Canada. Yeah. They were looking for a chair for their board, and I did get a call. I did submit a lot of names, and they were, I know that there were some explorations around some of the names that I had given, which unfortunately did not materialize, and a man was nominated. A lot of people reacted, you know, badly, saying, could they have not made an extra effort, etc. I say, yes, probably they should have started way earlier searching for a woman, because it will take longer, because there are less women who have that type of profile at this point, simply because there's less women who have that experience. But there's also women who need to say, you know what, I may not be ready for the role, but you're offering it to me, and I am going to take it, and I'm going to step up to the plate, and I am going to impress you. So we need to take risk, and that is the only way that we are going to grow. If we don't come out of our comfort zone, I mean, nothing magic is ever going to happen, where it's going to be same old, we're going to be stuck in the same jobs, and you need to put up your hand. And if somebody taps you on the shoulder, you need to listen and dive right in.
Well, what I find interesting that, I mean, obviously you and I both are introverts. We talk, and we can talk to people and those types of things, but you bring up a very important point. You know, when we rear, you know, maybe not us, I don't have a girl, I know you have a girl, you know, the women that were around that are younger in my frame of reference, I talk to them about using their voice, being true to themselves, those types of things. But if you're not coming from an environment, even if you're smart and you've gotten up pretty senior in organization, sometimes you might be, like you said, a little bit more reserved. You may have the background, maybe you're stepping into something higher where you're thinking, wow, how am I going to do this? But it's that stepping into it and taking that risk. So the mentoring program that you have, does it kind of pair people with more senior people? What's involved in the actual mentoring program?
Yes. So as I mentioned, our mentees are at the VP level.
Okay.
Our mentors are, they're both men and women.
Okay.
They are at the C-suite level, for the most part, CEOs, chairs of boards, men or women who sit on major boards and who can recommend, these women for board openings, for jobs, etc. Because, these women do understand that they're not going to get a major board nomination if they haven't advanced their career to a certain level where they've got P&L management experience, where they've got something to bring to the table. And we're sensitizing boards to not put too much emphasis on bringing CEOs to the table, because there are only 5% of women CEOs. So it's a vicious circle.
Right.
And a woman, let's say at a major bank who runs a division, who runs a province, manages that P&L, it's a huge role. Yes, her title is senior vice president, but it's a huge role. So, they will go after a man who has less experience, and they will question less his ability than they would for a woman. So that also needs to stop. It's until I think everybody's comfortable with the concept that, we've got the capacities that are required. We think differently from men, which is why it is so robust to have a decision-making process that is, shared by both men and women, and which is why we have men on our board as well, because they will bring a perspective to the table that we hadn't thought of. And it's the same thing for younger people as well. The government of Quebec has recently put in place legislation for crown corporations where you have to have one individual under the age of 35 per a crown corporation board.
Wow.
And we're also in Quebec the first ones to have a law that requires parity, 50% of women on all our, so like what you have Hydro Ontario or Hydro One is our Hydro Quebec. Well, we've had parity forever on that board, on SAQ, our liquors board, etc. So that, what that demonstrates, Roxanne, is that when you legislate, you find the women, and when you don't legislate, you find excuses. So I've been lobbying for a while with, Justin Trudeau and the, I did also a testimony at the Parliamentary Commission last June to share my research, because I've been traveling pretty much everywhere over the past couple of years. I'm luckily sponsored by Air Canada to do this, but I've brought back a lot of case studies from what I've seen in other countries. And France, for instance, who had, just like us, they were at 12% of women in 2010 at the time that I founded Womeningovernance. Today they're at 40%, and we are stuck under the 20% bar because they have the legislation.
So with when you're lobbying, right? Like obviously we know how long that process can be.
It's
so
very
do you find that Canada is able to kind of benchmark themselves in reference to what they see globally? Like when you said you're in contact with Justin Trudeau and stuff like that. How open are they? Or is it, it's kind of like the tagline with a lot of companies, right? I would like parity, give me the label, maybe kind of look like I fit in, and I'll kind of toe the line. Do you find that there's an actual shift starting to happen because of obviously your organization, or just some of the things that you're seeing globally?
So there's definitely a shift in terms of the mindset and in terms of the desire to see more women. The discussion I had with Justin Trudeau on that very topic, he was very happy with the Bill C-25 that requires divulgation. Organizations have to say how many women they have, what targets they self-impose their targets, right? And what their results are. so what I was telling him is that that's not going to be enough, because there are no consequences. Right. And it is the exact same thing as what the Securities Commission put in place, which is called comply or explain. So organizations will just explain. This is why we were not able to find the women, etc. We say you need to impose certain things to help the movement, because it's just not moving. If anything, we're almost regressing. It's insane. Mm-hmm. But if there's openness, there's huge openness. I can tell you that when I did my testimony, I was at the National Assembly. I had both conservative and liberal deputies who were listening, and we spent more than an hour, and they were extremely receptive. They had my speech translated and make sure that they were able to send it around, and there were huge openness. Now, concretely, did anything happen? Not yet. I was invited actually by Justin Trudeau to speak at the Liberal Party Congress in April in Halifax. So I will say what I have to say again. So they're very kind to give me platforms, because I've also spoken at the women's commission for the Liberal Party a couple of years ago. So I do get a lot of traction. I have the ear of a lot of people, but we're really going to have to be more concrete. And a gender balanced cabinet is great, but what does that do for the corporate world? At this point, it hasn't trickled down. I also spoke, funny enough, at the National Assembly in Paris. So I was invited by a French deputy in 2015 to share, this situation here in Canada. And they also had invited a Swedish woman. And so France was sort of learning from Sweden and listening to what was going on in Canada, and realizing that they actually were ahead of the game, which is quite...
Which is fantastic. So there's an openness, but as we know, with creating big changes or systems, it's going to take a lot of small steps and adding on. But it sounds like you've been doing a lot. Now I'm curious, because I'm sure everybody's curious about your interview with Hillary Clinton. Yeah. And tell me what an amazing experience for you, but just the presence and what that was like for you, and kind of what kind of the nuggets were for you when you were able to spend time with her.
So first of all, I can tell you one thing is she's nothing like how media portrays her. That cold, distant woman who doesn't care about people. That is not her at all. Of course, she had to put on a sort of a facade, for all these years, because women in politics are so criticized. They are so judged. And then we end up with, somebody like Donald Trump in the White House. It's I don't even know how to qualify it, but just to give you a perspective, the first time I met her was in Toronto. I did 2 interviews with her, one in Toronto and one in Montreal. And in Toronto, I was backstage. I was waiting for her. I hadn't seen her, spoken to her before the night up. I had spoken to Uma Abedin, her right arm, for the past 20-some years, and 5-6 people on her team, but not to herself directly. So I was backstage. It was dark, and the wall was covered with Secret Service's agents. And all of a sudden, I see at the end of the corridor a pretty tiny woman, blonde, walking towards me. And I never realized that she was actually petite like I am. In my mind, somebody you admire like this, always under the impression they're tall and they're, statuesque. And so she walks towards me, and my heart stops. And she puts her hands on my shoulders, looks at me in the eyes, and says, "I couldn't wait to meet you." Wow. So I said to her, "You couldn't wait to meet me?" So, that was quite the ice-breaking experience. She was very soft, very kind, very reassuring. She said, "I've read about you. I was very impressed. I am, obviously trying to prove my profile, that I was going to do this." And she said that she was really, looking forward to the time that we were going to spend together on stage. And we spent an hour together, and it was just fantastic. We really clicked. She was so accessible. The crowd was I mean, there were almost 6,000 people in the room. And they were cheering her on. And they were, I mean, at first when I went on stage before her to introduce her, I thought I was never going to be able to finish a sentence. Every time I said something, everybody was screaming. So, the first thing I thought is, people know me well in Quebec, but not in Toronto. And I thought they might say, who's this woman on stage? And, I said, good evening. My name is Caroline Codsi. I'm the president and founder of Womeningovernance, an organization for the advancement of women. They started screaming the minute I said for the advancement of women. So, they put me at ease right away, where I felt very, very welcome. And then I said, a few words about Hillary Clinton, and I said, and who lost to political newcomer Donald Trump, and everybody was booing. So it was a very fun crowd. Then she came on stage, and it was, obviously a huge standing ovation. People couldn't stop cheering and applauding, and so very amazing experience. Then a month later, we did Montreal. And so that was my crowd with my family, first row. And,
no pressure whatsoever.
Yeah, that was very different. It was very different. But since we had already done it, I guess it was even more comfortable, more at ease. It was a little bit different in the sense that we were more ad-lib than we were in Toronto, I guess. But my goal was to really highlight some of the things that not everybody knew about her, and also her message. And the reason why she wrote that book, What Happened, is really around sensitizing people, not only regarding the sexism and misogyny, and the importance of having more women in politics so that we could get sexism out of politics, but also everything that happened around the Russian intervention. And because she got blamed a lot, and she took the blame, and she did recognize that she was disconnected with part of the population, and she was too close to Wall Street, and all of these things, she made amends, but she really wanted general population to understand the risk to our democracy and what happened, how the FBI behaved, what Donald Trump did. And I think it was essential that she wrote this book. I think it was very therapeutic for her, but also very important for the rest of us to better understand.
So what was your most special moment in interviewing her? What is one pebble that you kind of thought, wow, this spot for me right now was there one particular thing that she shared that really kind of,
Well, she made me laugh at one point when we were talking about, I asked her to share how she felt when she went to the inauguration. And so she shared what she did before, which was hope that maybe others weren't going, or so they were calling all the former presidents, but everybody was going, so she felt she had to go there. And she was talking about the glances that she was exchanging with Michelle Obama, thinking, is he for real? And, is this something going on? And then she shared that at the end, when they were leaving, George W. Bush said out loud, in Texan bluntness, that was some weird shit. So that was
just the authentic part to what it is to hold a role like that.
Exactly.
So,
There's a true woman behind the candidate.
There is, obviously, and to be able to really have done the things that she's done. And I've not read her book, but I would love to pick up a copy and read about her entire experience. Now, you
can also download the Audible, by the way. I read the book, I downloaded the Audible, it's her own voice.
And I just got that.
As you're driving the car, Hillary Clinton's talking to you.
Okay, awesome. I'll do that. So tell me, you have a daughter, you speak
a lawyer
to
now?
And she's a lawyer now. Wow.
Yeah.
So, when you speak to women that are coming up, and, gone are the days where we tell our little girls, to be nice and cross their legs, and we tell them to go out there in the world, and we tell them all these things. What kind of words of wisdom do you have for young women or young little girls coming up that you think is important for them to reflect on as they get out there and kind of face the world?
Well, I think that this generation is much more fortunate than we are, because they've seen sort of several revolutions of women saying, you know, enough. I don't think that we are, well, you know what? Parents still have a major role. I think what we need to stop doing is telling girls that they need to be pretty and boys that they need to be strong. So I've taught my daughter that she needs to be strong. I also have a son, and he, you know, obviously is a feminist and follows everything that we do and very involved with women in governance. But, you know, my daughter became a lawyer at age 22, so very young. She has very quickly understood that it's a world where if you don't take your place, nobody is going to open the door for you. You know, and she has learned from my own experience that if they don't open the door, you go through the window, you go through the fire, the chimney, you find a way, but you get in there. And she's very much like me. And the other thing is I've been heavily involved in the community since always. And my children got involved very young. I mean, at age 11, they were already with me at, you know, I was spokesperson for the Salvation Army for 5 years. My kids were there. For the Missing Children's Network, my kids were there. For the Cancer Society, my kids were there. And now they're involved. They've been for the past 5 years involved with the Daffodil Ball, the two of them, and which is for the Canadian Cancer Society. And they've realized to what level it served them to be well networked, because they both hold, you know, she works at a law firm, he works at the World Bank, you know, at a very young age when some of their friends were struggling or, you know, working at Dairy Queen or Dunkin' Donuts, they were already working in major organizations. And that doesn't happen just because you have a good CV. That also happens because you're well networked, you're well intentioned, people see you come across as someone who does more than, you know, just you go above the call of duty. You know, like I've worked in career management for decades. You know, we look at CVs. What else do you do? You know,
Right.
you have
Absolutely.
an MBA. So what? Tons of people have an MBA. You've worked at a major accounting firm. So what? There's tons of people coming out of there. But what have you done? Who are you? And if you have either created a movement, even better, or at least participated in a very active way and demonstrated that you believe in your role as a corporate citizen, I think that says a lot. I've also at that time coached lawyers at a major law firm who were, let's call them junior partners, and we're told that you will never become an equity partner if you're not involved in the community, because that goes against our values. So if you want to be an equity partner, i.e. really speak in the name of the firm, well, you're going to have to get involved. And some of the discussions I had were quite striking, where the person would say, well, what more do they want from me? You know, I work so hard, I don't have time, I can't be everywhere, I can't do everything. Well, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. And those excuses of I don't have time, I don't buy them. Listen, I'm a single mother. I raised my children on my own. Their father doesn't even live in the country. He left the country when they were 13 and 15 at a very difficult time. And I've really decided that I was going to keep, you know, the boards I was sitting on, still do all that I'm doing and get them more involved. So we, you know, jokingly, my son was telling Mélanie Joly, the Minister of Patrimoine, I don't know how to say that in English anyway.
It sounds better in French anyway, whatever it means in English.
And he was telling her, you know, when because they often get asked, you know, when do you see your mom? And they say, well, sometimes we need to go to her events to be able to see her. And you know what? I think it makes her more resilient, more independent, autonomous children. And, you know, those women who think that they're feel too guilty because the kids have to make their own dinner, I think that they need to think twice.
Right, because you're already setting a stage, and then likewise, like with you, I've been on my own for a bit too, and you know, after we left our corporates, I think you left before I did, but really, and then you're kind of on your own, and it's kind of like,
right.
Now what, you know, and it's really about the social welfare that you're demonstrating by your actions when you go out and you sit on these boards, or you speak at events, or you know, help someone. They're constantly watching you and modeling what kind of things that they see from you on an ongoing basis, and becoming, like you said, good citizens, just overall based on wherever they go. And my 16-year-old will often say that, that he can see how I'm doing these things and how helping people, how that makes a difference, because obviously he's a bit younger than your guys, but they're very, very impressionable. So Caroline, I want to know that if there's women out there that are interested in getting a hold of your organization, or any other elements, they may just want to reach out and learn more, even if they're kind of still coming up in the ranks. Where can they get a hold of the
our website, womeningovernance.org.
Okay.
We're also very active on social media, but actually we need to change the name because we're under the French name only on social media. We're going to add the English name. It's La Gouvernance au Feminin. If you go on the website on womeningovernance.org, you will see our social media. It's easy to access. And we do share in both languages. We actually share a ton of English articles on a daily basis. And there's close to 50,000 people on the different, between LinkedIn, between Twitter, between Instagram and Facebook. There's a page and there's a group. There's a lot of discussions that go on there every day. And a lot of men also participate in the conversation. It's very rich.
Fantastic. And I've been reading a fair amount of it because I can click on the translation, which has been fantastic. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Roxanne, for the invitation.
Authenticity and voice is such a key thing, and being women in the world is important. But like you said, we can't do this alone. We need to be able to have good men along the way that will assist us to break through these barriers. And it's, we're making inroads, but any kind of assistance is necessary. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in again to Authentic Living with Roxanne. If you're wanting more information from Caroline, please reach out. And if you're needing to connect with me about any of this information, you can reach me at roxannederhodge.com. Okay, take care.
We're good.
Join Authentic Living with Roxanne every Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern on Global Voice Radio.